Greetings, everyone. This is Kamara Mary Rajabari. How are you? I have not done a shrine message in a while, so my apologies. It's been very much a whirlwind of my own learning, of my own process, and I wanted to make more of these videos. It's just been my time and taking on new projects. So I'm recommitting to doing that in the new year. And there's a video that I've been kind of needing to make. I've been called to kind of make this video regarding ancestors. And this is based on, of course, my own knowledge and my own opinion. So take what you can take from this and then leave what you need to leave. And I feel like I can give my perspective because I don't belong to any particular religion. Although I've had the wonderful opportunity of studying with some really great spiritual teachers, I am very much my own practitioner, and I integrate a few different spiritual practices. So that's a little bit of my background. I don't have a particular religion I'm going to talk about when it comes to the ancestors. That is something that I highly recommend that you research on your own, especially when it comes to traditional African religions. There's some very beautiful and powerful practices out there, and I do recommend that you look into them, find out what resonates for you, and move forward as you feel directed. However, this video is at its basic level talking about ancestral practice. And what the ancestors are is honoring your ancestors is a traditional practice where you work with people who are deceased that were once related to you, and they can be spirits from your bloodline, generally thought of as family members, known and unknown. There are also ancestors that are maybe community people, maybe a past teacher or a past spiritual leader or a past leader in your community. Those people are also ancestors. However, they're not blood related to you. They're kind of a different category of ancestor, and we might touch on that a little bit later. But generally, when I'm talking about ancestors for this particular discussion, it is those who are deceased, who are blood related to you, known and unknown, meaning you may have known them while they were alive, you may have never known them while they were alive. They may have transitioned decades ago, generations ago. However, they are still a part of your ancestral bloodline. So, in many different African cultures, ancestors are very important to spiritual practice. So and it's varied all over the world. Africa is a continent filled with a lot of different countries, filled with millions upon millions communities. So when you imagine every little hair on your head individually, that is how many different ways there are to practice in Africa. So when I speak about Africa, just keep that in mind, that it's so varied, and there's no one who can tell you this is definitive about Africa, because there's just that many people on the continent and that many different practices. However, the undercurrent of it all is that there's this same blood, African descent blood, that runs its roots underneath all of Africa. So keep that in mind too, that we're all interconnected, and that you will find similarities more than you will find differences. Who is an ancestor? I kind of answered that already. So forgive me, I'm looking at my notes because I want to make sure that I was guided in writing this out, and I think that that was a channeled message. So I want to make sure that I'm communicating everything that I wrote out and I heard. So again, we already discussed who the ancestors are, mostly your family members, people deceased, known and unknown. How do you work with your ancestors? Well, I want to dispel a myth because I think there's a lot of people out there who may belong to more modern day Western religions who think that people who are practicing traditional African religious practices worship their ancestors. We do not worship our ancestors. Ancestors are not worshipped as gods. Ancestors are actually spiritual beings, that entities that we practice with. They assist us from the spirit world. So when someone says they're honoring and working with their ancestors, they're not worshiping them. They worship most likely a creator, a god, whatever they call that creator or god. Ancestors are what many African traditions believe are your closest liaison to God. So ancestors are able to see to those things that are on their level in the spirit world. Many times it's mundane things in your life, such as your career, your love life, your family life, your social life. Ancestors have a real, they can help you with a lot of those particular issues, financial issues. They are able to assist with. So a lot of those mundane, everyday living things, ancestors can be of great assistance with, but they can also be assistance with a lot of deeper spiritual issues as well. So definitely remember that it is not a worshiping of ancestors. Ancestral veneration is not a religion. It is part of a spiritual practice, and it's part of a sacred, honorable, and respectful practice too. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And we're not the only cultures, when we think of the vastness of African people, that have an ancestral veneration. The Chinese, the Buddhists are very much into ancestral honoring of the ancestors and have altars to ancestors. Japanese, Chinese, many of the Asian cultures do this. Most of them are Buddhist, but I won't say all of them. I think some Hindus have ancestral recognition as well. So there's a lot of different religions and cultures who honor their ancestors. It's not just an African thing. And remember, we're all interconnected in this world somehow. Keeping that in mind, I want to kind of take a little bit of a side note because sometimes, especially in American culture, we label ancestral honoring of the ancestors as voodoo. And I want to talk to you about voodoo. Voodoo, known as vodun, is a traditional African religion. It is practiced by many people all over the world. Many in Africa, but many who are in the Americas, North America, Central, South America, as well as the Caribbean. Vodun is a very old and ancient religion. And when people just kind of call out something and say, oh, well, that's voodoo, be careful because you are contributing to a very negative stereotype that has been really largely created by Hollywood to perpetuating some negative stereotype about a religion that mostly very few people, except those who practice it, know anything about. So be careful in just using those terms and throwing them around when you see someone doing something that may be nature-based and calling it voodoo. And if you're not sure and they have not said specifically to you that it's voodoo, voodoo deserves respect, just as any other religion. And if you're a person who considers yourself very respectful of people's practices, please take care in how you label people's practices, because voodoo is not about hexing or putting spells on people. You know, it is a very powerful religion, and it is based on accountability too. Accountability to the spirits, to God, to spirits, to ancestors. So that in that accountability, of course, there can be practices that really will make people aware of where they need to step up and be accountable. And that's what I'm going to say about it, because I'm not a traditional voodoo practitioner, although I've had the honor of being around people who are voodoo practitioners. And so I just feel like that needed to be said, because sometimes you have people just kind of labeling something that people are doing as voodoo and they have no idea. So just do your research and be respectful of that, and know that not all traditional African practices are voodoo. There's many different traditional African practices, from Akan tradition to Lukum. I mean, it all matters. Some of it is geographical, some of it is just based on what your family practiced when you grew up. So know that there's some complexity to all of this. It's not just a simple generalization of any of it. So back to the ancestors. And also, oh, I have on here, voodoo is not hoodoo. Hoodoo is different from voodoo, although I'm sure that hoodoo was influenced very much by voodoo. That was said to state. So just realize there's a lot of different intricacies with a lot of these different practices, and there's a history behind them. So make sure that you learn the history of whatever it is that strikes you as interesting, and learn that history so that you can be respectful of all the different practices. Okay, for now, back to the ancestors. So why would you work with your ancestors? Why do people do this? People work with their ancestors, again, because ancestors are that close liaison for you in the spirit world and with the creator, whoever you call the creator, God, goddess, whatever you would name for that highest of high. Ancestors work directly with that highest of high. And they're here because they want to act on not only your behalf, but behalf of your whole bloodline. So imagine that there's like this energy there that wants your family to continue, has been assisting your families from the beginning of time, because they're dedicated to your bloodline. They're dedicated to the success, the abundance, the opportunities, the good health, the protection of your bloodline. That's who your ancestors are. They are those blood relatives who are invested in you. They only want your success in this world. Your success in this world means their success, means your bloodline success, means that your family gets to continue on healthy and prosperous. So your ancestors are there to do that work. They want to work with you. And many times, ancestors are looking for you. They're looking for that one person in the family. Maybe everybody shut down for whatever reason. Something happened generations ago, and things just became shut down. People just stopped listening to the ancestors. And maybe generations later, there's this one person, this one kid, this one woman, this one brother who's like, you know, I feel something and I want to investigate that. I've heard about the ancestors. I want to know who my ancestors are. That's all they need. Ding. Oh, there's one. There's one who's open to us, open to hearing what we have to say, open to our advice, opening to learning more about our bloodline. A person who's possibly committed to working with us and keeping our family healthy. All you need to do is say the word. And probably if you're listening to this video, especially this far, you might be one of those people. You know, you might be one of those people who's all of a sudden, ding, 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 you're hearing their call. You know, and the hearing of the call can be very subtle. It could be something like your intuition is guiding you towards a book, towards a movie, towards a conversation, a workshop. Something happened where all of a sudden this information about ancestors is available and you've never heard it before. That's answering the call. So ancestors sometimes come as that sixth sense. They may come as that spiritual nudge guiding you towards something that you need to learn so that you can be put in touch with them. It might be a teacher, it might be a spiritual practice, a religion. Something's going to happen to lead you closer to them. So that's how they work. And like I said, they can assist. They're very powerful and beautifully able to assist with our everyday life concerns, such as love, money, health, spiritual problems, career, parenting, all those things, household issues. They're wonderful. They hunger to be able to assist you in those means and in those matters. So I'm happy if you are answering the call for your bloodline. That's a great thing. And especially for those of us who are African descent, African American, whose ancestors endured the horrific Middle Passage, Kabuka, of coming here enslaved, and then enduring the genocidal, horrific treatment that they endured generation after generation. That is because of your ancestors. There's no people, I don't personally believe African people could have survived the experience of slavery without their ancestors. So keep that in mind. Our ancestors were that nudge many a times, many a days, many an hour for our ancestors who were enslaved. They kept their spirits up. They kept their mental faculties in place. They helped them to help themselves in situations where they couldn't always 100% be free. You know, like they helped them to find freedom in some kernel of their life. Whether it was freedom fighting, whether it was quilt making, whether it was going out and finding healing herbs in the fields, whether it was taking care of the babies and teaching them in the dark how to read and write, whatever it was, those sparks of genius were the ancestors working through those Africans, keeping them alive in the most horrific situations. Horrific. So that is how our people survived. And we may not have fully been intact. I'm not saying that we're fully intact. You know, I'm not saying that people came out of that experience unscathed, that the ancestors just made it all rosy, because that was not what happened. But they made it so that we had some kind of way to find a kernel of balm in there, even if it was just our love for each other, our love for life. So when you think about that, know this. You have ancestors that stand above you. You have ancestors that stand below you. They stand to the left of you. They stand to the right of you. They stand in front of you and behind you, all around you, in, through, and around you. They walk with you throughout the day, even if you aren't aware of them. So be in that consciousness all the time. And when you begin to work with them, your life will transform. Because that way, you begin to infuse your relationship with them and you strengthen it. You feed them with your awareness. There's other ways to feed them, which I'll talk about. But the first way, the most primary way to feed your ancestors is with your awareness. So, let's talk about this for a minute. I wasn't sure if I was going to share this. So I was like, yeah. Anyway, so sometimes I'm getting like a little transmission. I'm like, really? You want me to talk about that? It kind of sounds a little bit off the cuff, but it's not off the cuff. And I do this. It's just like a little inside joke I have with my own ancestors. But it just struck me as something to say. I could be personally saying this, or I have an ancestor who wants me to say this, so just bear with me. African women, if you've noticed in the last few years, I want to say like 6 to 7 years, there's been a movement of African descent women in this country, maybe all over the world, going back to their natural hair. And here's the thing, like historically when our people were enslaved in America, I'm not so sure about the other regions like the Caribbean and the Americas in terms of Central South America. But in the United States, when African women were enslaved, we were often mandated to cover our hair. Our hair, just as a side note, hair historically has been seen as a tool of power. Hair has been thought of across many indigenous cultures to hold power. And hair for the African women is our antenna to spirit. So think about the deepness of this, that we were historically in this enslavement process, our hair was covered. It wasn't allowed to be out or wild or its natural state. It was covered and subdued. And that was very purposeful. And then later on, it went to where African women, the only acceptable means for our hair was to have it straightened. So keep that in mind, because the hair is that spiritual antenna to spirit. I am not saying that everyone with natural hair is just spiritual and in touch with themselves, nor am I saying that anyone with straightened hair doesn't have that same ability to reach out to the ancestors. I'm just saying that it's interesting that now there is a very large movement of African women going back to this natural state, that in some way it's made us more open to working with our ancestors. Maybe not, take it, leave it, but that's what came up, so I expressed it. And I kind of believe it. You know, I sense that sisters are really getting to a place where we're open, you know, and we're willing to, we're transmitting some really powerful things right now. So I believe it. Anyway, how do the ancestors communicate with you? Sometimes they will come to you in dreams. Oftentimes people will experience them again as nudges, as intuition, thoughts of intuition, flashes of memory, things of that sort. So think about that in terms of, again, all those people before us who were freedom fighters. Like, they kept getting this nut. Harriet Tubman, I mean, you read some of her accounts. I mean, she was just like led by the ancestors when she was doing her work fighting for the freedom and leading people to freedom. She, I mean, speaking in tongues. I mean, people saying that she would just have these spells where she would just faint, you know. So there was like, her accounts are very interesting. I would suggest you read them, because I felt like that was someone who was like deeply in touch with her ancestors, because that's who moved her and motivated her to do the work that she was doing. So I want to look at my notes a little bit. I kind of said a couple of those things already. So let's talk about a little thing about how, these are my opinions about working with ancestors, and people have a lot of different opinions, but this is what I've been taught. Generally, you want to work with your ancestors. You want to work with people who are blood related to you. Now, if you don't know who that is, maybe you were adopted and separated from your family, you have no clue what even a name of a relative was from the past, that is okay. You can still work with your ancestors. You do not have need to have known them in this life. So that's fine. However, working with other people's ancestors. Now, I don't know where I was. I read something and I was like, what? You know, someone was like, oh, yeah, you can call in other people's. And I was like, no, 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 no. I would say be very cautious of someone who says that you can work with other people's ancestors. And you know what? This has actually come up as some very interesting conversations because there's certain houses in traditional African religion that do not allow people from other cultures to be initiated because they said that this is an ancestral based religion, and ancestral religion means that you are blood related, meaning, you know, if you're from a different culture, obviously from a different culture, that they won't initiate you because they believe it's a bloodline related spiritual practice. I would say in part that is true. Like, your ancestors are yours, like they're from your bloodline. Keeping that in mind though, also there's many of us who have mixed ancestry, and good or bad, for the like or the not of it, you have those ancestors in your bloodline too. And you know, I've had some communication from ancestors of different cultures before that said, hey, we're here too. So keep that in mind. Predominantly though, for me, my ancestors that I communicate with, they seem much more like they look like me. I'm just saying that if you have mixed ancestry, just know that there may be people from that bloodline trying to communicate and assist you as well. And keep that in mind. However, not using, but trying to communicate and work with ancestors from someone else's bloodline, I'm not so sure about. Now, there is a thing of honoring and respecting those past leaders and past teachers and people who have been very influential in your community who weren't necessarily blood related. There is a way of giving honor to those people, and there's a way of working with them that's honorable and respectful and giving honor to them. Working with them every day on the daily, I would suggest working with your familial ancestors primarily only. And just keeping in mind that it's okay to give respect to that. But, you know, some religions and some practices may vary on what I just told you. But that's, to me, that is what I've been taught, and that's what makes sense to me. Because one is, you might call in someone, you're calling in some ancestor, some name, and you don't know the person. They're not committed to your bloodline. How do you know what's showing up is what's showing up? I mean, that's the thing. It's just, there's a lot of random energy out there. And I'm not trying to scare you. There's a lot of random spirits out there. They're not attached to anything. They want to become attached to something. And as with life, you wouldn't walk down a dark alley in a place that you didn't even know with no lighting just because what? You know? So, I mean, as you walk in this world and hold yourself and protect yourself and respect yourself, so should you when you're dealing with the spirit world. I mean, to me, that's logic and it should just make sense. Use this path with common sense. You know, the ancestral path, what's beautiful about it is it's yours. You don't need an intermediary to communicate with your ancestors. You don't. There may be people who are trying to sell you that, but I'm going to tell you right now, you don't need an intermediary to communicate with your ancestors. It's you and them. So, with that being said, There are some different religions that may say, hey, we're going to do this, ancestral communication to make sure that you're part of this particular house and this and that. That's part of their religion, that's part of their practice. But what I'm talking about here is basic ancestral communication. You don't need an intermediary for. It's you and your ancestors. So how does this relationship work? You can invite your ancestors in through prayer. Some people use divination, which also can include prayer. Some people will use altar work, which also includes prayer and other practices. Sometimes there's possession. And again, that's what I'm saying. Like some particular practices, they may have the high priest or priestess or the higher. I'm using priest and priestess as a generic term because there's a lot of different names for a lot of different high teachers in traditional African religions. So why don't I say that? High teachers in traditional African religions may take possession to find out who you're communicating with in terms of the ancestor world. That might be part of their practice. So I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying that's part of that tradition. Is it necessary that you have to do it that one particular way? In my opinion, no. Like, I think that anyone, even if you have no religious affiliation right now, you can begin to communicate with your ancestors. And it's a simple process. The ancestors don't really require a lot. There's other spirits and deities that people work with that require a lot of offerings, that require, maybe they just require money. I don't know. There's those. We're talking about ancestors. Ancestors, again, we have to remember, want to work with you. They want to see the very best happen for you. So in that way, they're going to make themselves very accessible to you. Now, so you have to figure out your path in this whole business, because many of the traditional African religions incorporate working with your ancestors. So that is a large part of what they do. And it is a very beautiful and powerful part of what they do. So in terms of finding that path, ask your ancestors, is this the path for me? And of course, the highest teacher who's part of that religion is going to ask the same of their pantheon. Is this person right for our house, right for our religion? Should I train this person? Should I initiate this person? The same should fall in your court. Is this right for me? How do you advise me, ancestors? Should I get involved? This is the best way for me to communicate with you and to follow my spiritual path. And often, very often, houses are very invested in having the right people in them. So they will tell you the truth. Oh, this is not your path. Or yes, this definitely could be your path. So use some discernment there. Develop a practice with your ancestors. My recommendation, develop your practice with your ancestors where you're in touch with them on some level to figure out how these life decisions will take place. Getting involved with traditional African religions, what I'm being called to say about that is to note that many of us yearn and hunger. I'm going to use those words, yearn and hunger, to be in connection with our traditions. Keep in mind that I said those traditions vary, like in numbers, like the hairs upon your head. Keep in mind also that those traditions, they change, they've expanded, they've developed as they've come to the Americas. Sometimes they've changed in ways, even on the homeland, due to colonization, due to capitalism, everything. So sometimes what was traditional is no longer that close to the practice anymore. So keep all those things in mind. Keep everything in mind. My advice is to observe. My advice is to know a few different things when you're seeking out a head teacher, a teacher of traditional African religions, because there's some very powerful and very beautiful and very honest and people out there with a lot of integrity who really want to put us back in touch with our traditions. On the flip side, there's people out there, I don't know what their intentions are, but I don't always observe them as being good for our people. So you have to practice discernment, especially when your level of hunger is in a place of where you yearn and you yearn for something, because people can sense that about you and take advantage of it if you're not careful and watchful and looking out for your own self-interest. And it's best self-interest, not only yourself, your family and your ancestors. So just know this about any teacher of anything. Honest teachers are not going to ask for sex. They're not going to make sexual overtures at you. They're not going to ask for sex in any form or fashion. That's plain and simple. They're not going to be abusive to other people. Abusive to people in their family, abusive to people other than yourself. This could be physically, sexually, verbally, financially abusive to anyone. So if you observe that about a teacher, walk the other way. Also, they're not going to require, I want to be delicate about this. They're not going to require like these absorbent, really, these fees that will impact you and your family in such a way that you're destitute. There are fees involved for spiritual work, and in many cases, I agree with those fees. There's so much work that's being done, mundane and spiritual, to do this work that certain houses do. So fees are involved. It could cover materials, the times of the teachers, the spiritualists. So fees are involved in many of these practices. And it covers the life, the everyday life of your spiritual teachers. Your spiritual teacher needs time to be able to focus on the practice for the community. So the community in right should support that spiritual teacher if they feel like that's someone that they want to lead them full time on this pathway. And this is for any tradition. I mean, in Asia, monks do not work. Spiritual leaders do not work. The community takes care of them. So in that sense, I could see that there are fees involved to help sustain the life of your teacher, because we live in an everyday mundane world. I mean, we all have bills to pay. We all need food, and we all need health care and things of that nature. And if someone has taken on the responsibility of being a spiritual teacher, providing the community with spiritual health and help, then you would want to support them in making sure that their life is balanced. Do you want their lives to be such that you're needing to upkeep their mansion and all this other stuff? That's going to be up to you personally and that community. However, I'm going to say this. If it comes between you giving $1,000 to the shrine and feeding your children and paying rent and putting gas in your car, I think you need to evaluate this, especially when we go back to the ancestors, because the ancestors are here to assist you. So if you're in a practice that's right for you, you should be seeing positive outcomes. Positive outcomes. So if you're in a practice where life is completely and always a challenge. Not that there will be no challenges in any kind of spiritual path, but if you're in a life patterns of chaos and challenge, then I think that's a message from your ancestors that maybe you need to relook at how you're communicating with them, and how you're practicing your spiritual practice. Is this the most direct pathway to communicating with them and assuring the success of your family? So that's what I'll say about that. As always, because I'm not attached to any particular religion, I just say research and observe. Go with your heart. Learn at the basic level how to get in touch with your ancestors to receive their advice. And I'm going to talk about that. This last part. How to communicate with your ancestors. And again, this may vary based on religious practices. But what I'm talking about here is a spiritual practice, because I can't tell you this is from one particular religion, traditional or not. So here it is. When your ancestors are looking for that one person, you decide one day, I want to know more about working with my ancestors. That's the light bulb. That's the moment where, ding, 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 there's a little light in the tunnel with the ancestors saying, hey, look, Kamara wants to know more about us. Isn't that beautiful? I've been watching her. I've been hoping that one day she would say those words. Okay, so your awareness has opened up a little light in the portal. Now, and these are suggestions, and on this pathway, you're going to learn what's right for you. So I can only give you small basic suggestions, and then you'll decide what's right for you, right? You may drop some things, you may add some things, and it's all beautiful because it's yours. It's you and your bloodlines. It's not mine. So, how can you begin to explore this relationship? I'm going to tell you the very first thing that I did, and I really had no clue about what I was doing. I had a little table by my window in my room. This is years ago, way before, this is more than 20 years ago. I put a little table under the window, and I remember it was a full moonlight night because the moon was shining through my window. I had the curtains open. I lit a white candle. I had a little glass of water there. And I just sit there in prayer and meditation. And I ask the ancestors to please come to me. Please come to me and advise me to be my health and my help. And that was all it really took. From there, the relationship began to bloom. And it's over years. And did I always take their advice? Probably not. I don't even know always if I do now. Like sometimes I could be very stubborn. Sometimes I could be like, oh, that's not my ancestors. That's just me thinking this and that. You can get lazy. But hopefully this is a relationship you will grow and you will build. And that's what happens to me. So one way that you can do is just start a small altar. And the altar does not have to be big. It doesn't even really have to be on a table by itself. It can anywhere. There's an art to making an ancestor altar. There's definitely some things you do want to do, and I can make a whole nother video for that. But in the very simple, practical terms, you can light a white candle, get some fresh white flowers, have a glass that's clear, and fill it with clear water. Light your candle. Sit in prayer. Ask for those ancestors who sit at the feet of the Creator to come and work with you. Invite them into your life for a relationship. I always say those who sit at the feet of the Creator, just so that there is that intention there. Those who want to work with you, who sit at the feet of the Creator. That way you know they've done their work on their side and are ready to work with you. Another way, say you don't know who your relations are. That's the case sometimes. Some of us don't have family that we're in touch with. Either we were adopted, or we were fostered. That doesn't mean that you don't have ancestors watching over you. In fact, that probably means more, that you do have more that are wanting to be in touch with you, because you're not physically in, in space with people who are living or in your family. And it may indicate that your family desperately needs help, your bloodline desperately needs help. So, depending on your situation. So, again, ancestors are known and unknown. So you don't need to have had a picture. Oh, by the way, if you have a picture of them, that's great, that you could put on your altar. Make sure the picture is only including those that are deceased. So no pictures that mix people who are currently alive with people who are deceased. Just have pictures of the deceased on your ancestral altar, and any altar in general. So if you don't have any pictures of those ancestors, then you can simply invite them in prayer. Light a candle, glass of water, any other things that you would think, items that call you, maybe a crystal, clear crystal quartz, and that's a very good gemstone for ancestral work. Clear crystal quartz, even the clusters are great. So you can invite them in, known and unknown. I invite my ancestors in, who sit at the feet of the Creator, known and unknown, to sit with me, to advise me, to come to me, to be my assistance in my health. Ashe. So you could do that maybe once a week. If you have a nice space set up, then you can fix them a plate of food. Maybe these are things that you knew that they like to eat when they were alive that you fix. Maybe it was that cigar that your grandfather always smoked, that special brand. You put that cigar on the table. You don't have to light it, but you put that cigar. Maybe that gin that your grandmother liked to drink on a Sunday afternoon. Who knows? Just saying. So sometimes they like gin, sometimes they like water. If you know people have some alcohol issues when they were alive, maybe you just want to serve water. I don't know. That's not a hard and fast rule. But generally, water's safe. Although they call liquor spirits because of the spirits. Just remember that. So, yeah. And then keep a journal about this whole process. If you're new to this, keep a journal, because they're going to come to you in your dreams, maybe. They might even, speak to you through this guy who sits next to you on the bus. Ancestors come and communicate in various ways, I found, sometimes I'm just not open. I wasn't meditating in openness that day, and then somebody comes up to me in the store and they're like, hey, then they start talking, and it's a little bit off the cuff, because you're like, where is this person coming from? But all of a sudden they're like, I really just think it's important to get in touch with your aunts and uncles sometimes. They're just, all of a sudden something happens where you realize, oh, this is a message from my ancestors that I need to do A, B, and C. It happens. So there's a lot of different ways they'll communicate with you. And you want to just kind of journal about it. You want to keep yourself open and just be in this process. And then also just reflect on how your life is changing. You're going to find yourself more decisive about life. You're going to find yourself more clear about your decisions. You're going to find that your path and getting and learning even better ways of communicating with them, such as divination. You may be led to a class or a practice that helps you communicate even deeper with them. There's so much out there. And at the same time, it can get so complex, and at the same time, this practice is just the simplest. Invite them in, be aware, work with them. So, in that sense, I think that I'm almost done. I want to say one thing, and this was the last thing they wanted me to talk about, was ways to avoid working with your ancestors. Especially now, we're in some really turbulent times, Africans in America. And I'm saying this because of a lot of the violence that's been happening in our community, a lot of internal violence within the community, but a lot of external, a lot of incidents with police lately. And it's huge. I mean, people are depressed over this, people are angry, people are ready to take action. All of that is valid, you know. And people are just, you know, especially the mothers, we're worried about our children. You know, we're worried about what our children are exposed to when we're not able to be with them. We want them to be safe. And for me, the best advice I can give you as a woman who's a mother, woman who's responsible for her community, even if you don't have people like children, but you still have people you're responsible for, is to get in touch, start working with your ancestors. Start working with your divine feminine. Because that is what's going to, that you're going to learn how to mark your territory. And in that sense, not saying that you own people, but you have a domain as a woman. Like anything you've given birth to, anything that you protect on the daily, in terms of you take care of it, you feed people, the people you feed, the people that you ensure their health, the people that you house, that's all of your domain. And you can, as a fully awakened woman, learn how to protect your domain. So that way, when you do that, you work with your ancestors and learn these processes of divine feminine, you will be able to spiritually protect those who fall underneath you in care, you know? And that's a whole nother conversation. But start with your ancestors. Start working with your ancestors because you're going to be led to know what practices to implement as a woman. Every woman is born with divine power inside of her, comes out of her every month. It's called blood. And that blood is so divine, so protective, that you learn the right ways in using that blood, you can ensure the safety of those of your domain. And that's another conversation that we'll have soon. But the ways to avoid working with your ancestors, I want to talk about this because I think a lot of it just comes out of not knowing. But people will say things like, oh, you know, I'm going to have my ancestors, like ancestors are there to assist you. They're not there to harm others. They're not there to put hexes on other people. I mean, that's just, I think that would be confusing to your ancestors. Your ancestors are there, number one, to protect you, so they can protect you. But they're not there to do the other things to other people. So that's where I want to have that confusion cleared up, is that ancestors are there to work with you, protect you and yours, your whole bloodline. So, and whatever that protection entails, so be it. That's a whole nother conversation too. But, you know, when you ask for the protection of your ancestors, you know, you can ask for that. And making sure that you feed them properly and give them the proper respect, I'm sure that that would happen. I have no doubt of it. You know, if you have a good relationship with your ancestors, that protection's ensured. Now, does this mean, again, ways to avoid working with your ancestors, having expectations of a carefree life? Please don't put that all on your ancestors. There's work that you have to do. You can't just go to your ancestors and be like, well, I want this to happen, and then not put the action behind it in your everyday mundane life. That just, it doesn't work that way. So, you know, I want a new job. Well, you know, actually you have to apply for it, you know. Okay, we'll assist you, but you need to actually apply for the job too. You know, you need to make the effort to go have your resume done and all this other stuff. I mean, there's still those actions that you need to take as a person to ensure that you're working. Remember, this is a working with. This is not worshiping. It's working with. So making yourself really clear about that and getting rid of all that Hollywood nonsense about traditional African practices and spirituality. You get rid of that and you really begin to learn what it is and what it isn't, then you avoid a lot of mishaps. So, yeah, don't ask your ancestors to harm anyone. And no, they are here to assist you. For instance, you have trouble with a neighbor. Ancestors, can you assist me in better relationships with my neighbor? Or the neighbor's off the hook, and maybe they can't do anything about that. Then ancestors, can you put a barrier between me and those who would like to harm me? Every day, can you put me in the right place at the right time with the right people under the right conditions? You don't even have to mention them. Just know that there is, put a barrier between that which is for me and that which is not for me. Like that which is not for me, put a barrier between it. Like, I don't even want to see it. I want to be led away from it. And that can work. Use this relationship for your own empowerment. Use it for love. Use it for joy. Use it for abundance and wealth. And not only about money, abundance of life. Use it for your growth. Use it for your family's growth. Once you're set in it and you have a practice, teach your children, even from a young age, teach your children how to communicate with their ancestors. Make sure they know who their ancestors are. You'd be surprised how many kids don't know the names of their grandparents, their great-grandparents, and their parents have that knowledge. Sit down and do that family tree. Go back and have conversations with the oldest person in your family. Not just a family reunion now. Pick up the phone, call them. You never know when someone's going to transition, and that makes the work of doing your family tree a little more difficult, right? So have those conversations now. Make that a family project that you work on with your children. Hear the stories, record the stories. You can break out at your phone camera and record some of the elders in your family telling stories about people from a long time ago. This is how we keep that ancestral tradition going. And when people transition, honor them. Light a candle for them. Keep their picture there. Feed them those favorite foods that they like. Just keep it on your altar for 24 hours, then you can dispose of it. But this is a way that you're keeping that relationship. Talk to them like you would talk to me, or talk to them like you would talk to your friend. I'm going through this. I've been thinking about this lately. This has been this way. It's not only complaints. I've been really feeling happy. I've been really feeling blessed and grateful that you're in my life. I'm seeing how this relationship with you is working. Gratitude. However you would do that and show your love and respect. It's not about just getting. It's about that reciprocation. And like a real good indication to me is when you need to step up your relationship with your ancestors is that you start experiencing financial worries or disharmony in the home. Then oh, okay, time to step up my relationship with the ancestors. Maybe they need to be fed. Maybe I need to redo my altar. Maybe I need to really go out and just be in communication with them a little bit more longer, instead of just quick morning prayers. Maybe I need to spend a day or two in deep reflection and deep meditation. My ancestors recently asked for me to make an ancestor doll for them. So, that's something that I need to do. So, these practices, they're ongoing. And there's times, just like in any relationship that we have, even on earth, where we give it that kind of 30, 40, that 30, 50, what is that song, Teddy Pendergrass? Sometimes it's 60, 40, and you're giving the 40, they're giving the 60, and then they're like, hey, we need some reciprocity here. It's like every other relationship, right? So keep that all in mind. So I'm really glad that you took a moment to listen to this. I know this video is long. It's about an hour. Ooh, yeah, I might have to break it up into two different videos. But I wanted to share what was on my mind. And this is also coming through as a shrine message. So I hope that this was helpful in terms of what I had to say, what my ancestors had to say about working on the most basic level with your ancestors. This is not meant to trump any traditions that are out there. If you're part of those traditions, then follow the teachings that you're comfortable with. But this is for those who may have never, ever really considered working with their ancestors until right now. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful day. Go out and get started. Light your candle. Sit in prayer. See what the ancestors have to say. All right, peace.